Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be talking about the 21st to 23rd update, or Project Update number 10 as Ebb Software labels it, being after when the Kickstarter ended. And I'm going to be talking about all three of them, because in a period from Friday, November 5th to today, Monday, they have in fact posted 3 updates, and normally Scorn fans would be incredibly elated about the fact that holy crap, we've gotten more than a single update a year. But it's actually been a rather rough journey from start to finish, with the start being perhaps one of the lowest points in the both development and community standpoint, and the end being a light at the end of the tunnel that hopefully leads to a better outcome in the future. Now, normally for these videos I would either be analyzing a trailer that was posted or some screenshots or concept art before going into details about the post itself, but there actually was no visual materials for these updates. And given the nature of these updates, I feel it's best to read them out loud, paragraph by paragraph, and go over my thoughts and opinions on them. Starting with the first. Hello everyone. In this update, we will highlight the most common issues people have regarding this project and the reasoning behind some of our decisions. We have addressed some of these issues before, but we will repeat them once more. Because if you want to create something ambitious and consciously, or not so much, bite on something that you can barely chew, scope or production-wise, especially the first time around, you have to set up priorities and keep less important things to a minimum." End quote. So far, nothing too egregious, though we will find out what they consider to be less important things. The post continues with a hypothetical question likely asked by many people eagerly anticipating the game. What were we doing since the latest trailer was released in October last year? And the post answers as follows. There's no big revelation here. We were just developing a game, and that is nothing more to it than that. A year's not such a big period of time when it comes to game development. Some people really dislike us staying silent for so long period or such long periods. It's that way by design for a few reasons. The only thing that will get the game out the door faster is concentrating all the effort on development. That is our main priority. So the issue is, a year might not be a long time in the world of game development, but it is a long time to sit around wallowing in silence from the developers. It is a long time when development has been going on for many years already. Whether you want to judge it by the 7-year anniversary coming up on the 12th of November, or just the 4 years since their Kickstarter had been launched and successfully funded, it has been quite a while. Take note that the average AAA video game has a development cycle of 3 to 5 years. And while it might indeed be their primary priority to work on developing the game, it has not been the only thing they've done. Outside of providing updates to Microsoft and Kowloon Knights about how development is going, they have decided to band together with a handful of indie developers from their time in Kowloon Knights to start a indie developer venture fund by the name of Kepler Interactive. It is worth pointing out now that Kepler is named in this update but not explained in the least, nor is it expanded upon in any of the other updates. The post continues. There's a reason why big companies show CG trailers done by some other studio. They don't want to interrupt the development team in the middle of production. CD Projekt Red had great PR for Cyberpunk 2077, but that didn't help when the final game, that's not even me flubbing it or anything, that's word for word what he said, when the final game. Cyberpunk 2077 should have been delayed for a year, but the hype and the pressure from shareholders were more important. Maybe if they didn't push their developers to create marketing content, they could have put more time into fixing the game. So I'm sure this person thought he was clever for alluding to one of the biggest video game blunders of the decade in order to prove his point. And given that this decade has brought such gems as a sense of pride and accomplishment, or the entirety of Gamergate, it has indeed been a massive shit show of a release. But there are some problems with this paragraph. First of all, he points out that companies would outsource the creation of CG trailers to other studios while they work on the game. CDPR is a multi-billion-dollar company. It would have been chump change for them to do that throughout the development of Cyberpunk 2077 anyways. Another problem is that outside of the fact the game barely functioned, especially on last-gen consoles, it was rife with lost promises and failed opportunities. CDPR has stated in multiple interviews and trailers all of the different features and things a player would be able to do, only for the final product to have almost none of them. And not only that, but missing things that were presumed given in an open world game of its nature. Things like being able to alter your character's appearance, or at least their haircut, after the initial character creation screen, cars and drivers having some general AI, and police systems to be at least mediocre. The game was founded and built upon a series of lies, of untruths. So tell me, was there anything you've said leading up to the release of Scorn that is untrue? Anything presented in the Kickstarter campaign page that is completely false that you're not going to tell the community about before release? It's also worth pointing out that CDPR has built up its reputation as a sort of golden poster child of what a huge development studio should be. They went from the game will come out when it's ready and shitting on other studios for their loot box practices and general anti-consumer ways to treading new ground with things like not allowing YouTube reviewers they send PC keys to, not consoles of course, just PC keys, despite console players being 40% of their pre-order base, not allowing the PC users to use their own footage that they recorded themselves. Not even Ubisoft or EA has stooped that low. And with a post like this, you seem to only be continuing on the general shittiness of the video game industry, the worst from a consumer standpoint of the entertainment industries. Additionally, Cyberpunk 2077 is a massive game, one with hundreds if not thousands of developers, and typically, for any game, the closer to release that they get, the more material should be ready to present to the public anyways. When you get close to finishing your game should be finished. People should be able to look at it and see exactly the sort of quality they would get when the game releases. With how many cooks there were in the kitchen, so to say, whatever marketing was showing should not have had a substantial impact on what the developers were making. The post continues on. No amount of updates are going to make the game better, or make it come out sooner. Quite the opposite. It's just more tasks on the already enormous list of tasks to finish. It's time consuming to make your game look presentable to the public. That is done at the very end of the development process. While it is true that more and more updates isn't going to speed the game's release along, there are a few things worth pointing out here. Number 1, the enormous list of tasks that the developer has faced or is facing, many of them are self-inflicted. Nobody told you to double the scope of the game when Kowloon Knights offered you money. Nobody told you to accept a deal with Microsoft and port the game to the Xbox Series X. And especially, nobody told you to team up with some other indie devs to start a venture fund for other indie devs that no doubt has taken time, money, and manpower away from developing the game. Additionally, when it comes to closer to the game's release, you told Microsoft, presumably for both E3 and Gamescom in 2021, that the game would come out fall 2021. And this was on top of the gameplay trailer shown here, ending with saying that the game would come out in 2021. By all accounts, by all metrics that the consumer and Kickstarter backer had to go off of, the game was near completion. I would also like to stress that there's at least one new clip not seen in any of the previous gameplay trailers that was a part of the announcement trailer for Kepler Interactive, the telltale sign being the ammo counter on the right. So you are willing to work and finalize on clips and updates, just not for the Kickstarter backers. I mean, I assume you didn't just send them a clip of Scorn guys shooting a bear with a shotgun. You sent them more and they spliced that out as a representative for Scorn in their trailer. The post continues. The problem of hype. Hype can be a big problem if you need it at the beginning, but still need to work on a project for a considerable amount of time afterwards. We didn't do the marketing for the market, but for the potential investors. We are going to do proper marketing close to release. Presenting the game constantly just creates a vicious cycle. Every update creates anticipation that turns into disappointment for some because the game is not out yet. We realize the frustration, but at the end of the day, we think it's better to lay low and have most people put the game out of their minds and constantly bait them. The reason we needed the hype in the beginning is rather simple. Let us imagine that we live in some magical world where out of nowhere you just receive all the resources for the game you want to make as a completely unproven new studio. In this magical scenario, the public wouldn't know about the game because we wouldn't announce it until 6 months before the release, whenever that may be, and then just have a steady stream of marketing, hype, up until release. Here's a fun game for anyone who seems to be as invested in this game as I am. Try pausing the video right now and count how many different sources of income Ebb Software has stated they've gotten. I'll count them now. An unknown investor back in 2015 following the failure of their first Kickstarter game. Humble Bundle. Kickstarter backers in mid-2017. Kowloon Knights in early to mid-2018. Microsoft in late 2019, early 2020. Kepler Interactive at some point in 2021. That is 6 different sources, 6 groups willing to put out money to a developer that wants to make his dreams come true despite being completely unproven. And in fact, not only did you get one of the richest companies on the planet to bankroll you, but they agree to your terms and conditions when it comes to how you communicate with them, not allowing them to make changes or alter your vision. Do you believe in fucking magic yet, Ebb Software? And you're crying about the fact that, well, in a perfect world, you wouldn't have to announce a game until 6 months before it releases, but you're not alone in that. Major studios announce games over a year before it actually comes out. It's been a year since Bethesda announced Elder Scrolls 6. Elder Scrolls 6 is a game that absolutely is going to meet its budget. And Bethesda has all the money in the world to not announce it a year before it released. They probably didn't have the community support, considering it was released when Fallout 76 was still a very foul-smelling septic tank fire, but financially, they had no problem. That is just how the industry works, and I would agree with you that I would rather things be announced, less than a year before they come out. But you're not alone in this. You're not special. Additionally, when you launched your Kickstarter, by your own admission, you were almost done with Part 1 of the game. Not exactly 6 months away, but a fairly reasonable short amount of time, just a year, not that long for game development, remember, away from having the product. But the wait kept getting extended and extended as the scope became longer and longer. Again, due to nobody's choice but yours. The post continues, but in the reality we inhabit, nobody will even acknowledge you if they don't see the hype up front. This is why we showed the game, not some vain idea of showing off the work, and now we are stuck with the expectation to constantly feed the beast for years. We decide not to go that route, as we want to finish the game in the shortest time possible. Yes, handling the time leading up to release is really bad on our end, but as much as our financial situation has improved, we still have to dedicate resources to specific things, and we think that creating a good game should receive the overwhelming majority of our attention, rather than trying to constantly keep the marketing flames going. How we spent the time leading up to release should be of no consequence, or should not be of consequence, on the final release date. Only the quality of the game will. That may be the case, but as long as the majority of the focus is put on developing the game, as long as that's a brunt of your efforts, the majority of your 9 to 5s or however long you work, for the minimum, for what's left over, the scraps, it would not be that difficult to take some screenshots or clips of what you've been doing, post them on Kickstarter, and write a few paragraphs about what you did that month or previous 2 months. The fact that you've spent so much time writing this post when you could have actually informed people of how development is going and what you've been doing is fairly telling. And while ideally how you spend the time leading up to the release shouldn't impact when it's released, we know for a fact that you have been spending time doing things that have absolutely nothing to do with releasing the game. The final paragraph for this part of this post, it's a strange thing. If some didn't know the game existed, they would enjoy the 6 months of marketing and then the game. But now the very knowledge of its existence feels unbearable to them, Even if it turns out to be a great game, they simply won't be able to enjoy it because, my god, they knew about it for so long. Some people just burn out on the hype. If we release it on time and it sucked, they would soon forget about it in a day. So a few problems with this. First of all, you're still dwelling on a hypothetical when we're here complaining about the actual. Second of all, earlier you were talking about how Cyberpunk 2077, easily one of the, if not the most hyped game of the last decade, rushed development and should have been in development for an additional year. And that was what kneecapped its quality. And finally, while some hypothetical person might be burned out by the hype and decide even if the game comes out that it's shit, there's no way to say that the people who have been asking for updates on your Kickstarter page, or emailing you, or tweeting you, or anyone who hasn't forgotten about the game already, would experience the same thing. If the game is good, the game is good. And if the game is bad, the game is bad. And that is regardless of how long you spent developing the game. You could spend years and years and years more supposedly polishing the game and making it the best you can, but if your best isn't good enough, people would still forget about it in a day, now wouldn't they? The next part is as follows. Development hell. Development hell is a term that is thrown around quite often. It should be used on projects that change their core idea or scope mid-dev and can't adjust to. That doesn't apply to our projects for the most part. In our case, a lot of mistakes were made and we will make more in the future, but it's a normal process for a new, inexperienced team. Everything that was done up until the middle of 2018 has been reworked, 90% of it completely scrapped. It's about making it what we want it to be, not releasing it just because we gave some arbitrary release date. If it's not ready, it's not ready. Why would people want to play something that the developers think is not up to par? Tell me that a game is in development hell without telling me it's in development hell. Saying that you scrapped 90% of what you worked on is a great way to tell me that. Despite your insistence, that does come off pretty bad. Now, I might be the most understanding. I've done analysis videos comparing the 2017 gameplay trailer and the one you see now. Well, that's a 2017 one. And I would agree that the level of quality in assets and details is very, very different. However, it should be stressed that nearly starting from scratch in terms of what you're making is not a normal process for a new up-and-coming indie developer. Most up-and-coming indie developers do not have the luxury of being able to start completely from scratch. Finally, why are you calling the release dates arbitrary? Those are dates that you stated something would happen, not us. We didn't demand that the game come out this fall. You said the game would come out this fall. And Microsoft was comfortable enough in your conviction to reaffirm that twice, one for E3, one for Gamescom. If the dates you are putting out are arbitrary, then you need to pay more attention to the prospect of when you're actually going to be finished with something. Being able to meet a self-imposed deadline has been a major problem for the studio for years. And ideally, it's something that would have been worked on years ago, so we aren't facing this problem now. But alas, that is not the case. The penultimate section reads, Microsoft Kowloon Kepler deals. People are wary of big companies, and for good reason, most of the time, but in our case, it was nothing but support from everyone involved. We are even surprised by how smooth everything has been. Some think that influx of resources would create more problems, and that we should finish the game with as little resources. And again, that's not me being bad at reading, that's actually how that paragraph ends. So just another example of whimsical, wacky magic that you could partner with big corporations and not run into the kind of crap that one would expect from big corporations. Perhaps censorship demands, perhaps changes in vision, the sort of things that the Agony devs faced a few years back. You should probably check your mail more often. I think there might be a letter from Hogwarts waiting for you. He continues, creating an interesting and engaging game requires time and resources, period. Money is what allows us to create something of quality. Enthusiasm alone can only take you so far. We are obligated to periodically give them updates on the progress, but the builds that we are sending them are the builds we are making anyways. These builds don't have to be polished, as industry people understand unfinished builds, games in development. For the general public, things need to be polished. That is a major difference. Some people just want to see progress and don't care that it's a work in progress, but others will judge it as a finished project or product. Now, this is another problem-heavy paragraph. First of all, it is true that money does allow you to make more of a quality product, which makes it all the more egregious that this is a kind of attitude you take to people who have given you money that they do not expect to return to them, especially at an increase. Your Kickstarter backers are the only people who are actually in it for the sake of art, people who genuinely love the idea of your vision and want to see it come into fruition. Barring the backer tier rewards, the only thing they expect in return is for you to make the game, and some of them have not even donated enough to meet the minimum amount required in order to receive a digital copy of the game. This is more than many other indie games had. You've probably heard of Poppy Playtime, the latest flavor of the month indie horror game. The one that so many streamers and let's players are making videos of, people theorizing, a bunch of speedruns, and its very first speedrun controversy. That game was pitched on Kickstarter and failed to meet its goal. And it is a very small and simple game, far more so than Scorn is, but was able to persevere. Hello Neighbor was pitched on Kickstarter and failed. And yet, through presenting builds to the internet, allowing YouTubers to play through some early builds of it, the alphas and betas, it was able to sustain itself and reap in some funding and eventually release. And then it released a spin-off, Hello Neighbor Hide and Seek, a multiplayer spin-off, Secret Neighbor, and now Hello Neighbor 2 is in development and supposedly coming out this year, but seems like it might be delayed to the next. Or take Five Nights at Freddy's, for example, which had a Kickstarter that no one donated to, and yet the creator was able to persevere a little bit further and then release a game that ended up capturing the internet by storm. It has spawned multiple secrets, it has spawned tie-in novels, it's even spawned a movie that's in the works. In fact, it spawned a few movies that are supposed to be analogous to Five Nights at Freddy's. They just don't want to pay for the copyrights. Now again, I'm not saying these games come close to the level of detail and depth that Scorn supposedly will. Hello Neighbor is probably the closest one, though it is worth pointing out that gameplay-wise we haven't really seen all that much scope anyways. But the fact of the matter is, people have faced greater financial struggles and still put out their games. The second major problem I have with this paragraph is the fact that you are withholding showcasing things to your backers based on the fact that it's a work in progress. And your reasoning for this is that maybe, there would be someone stupid enough to take a look at a clear work in progress and judge it as a final product. Why are you withholding things from people who might be able to understand that something isn't finished for the sake of a bunch of smooth brains who you shouldn't even be catering to in the first place? And this is beyond the fact that you have shown works in progress before. Is this a finished entity? Or is it an unskinned, textureless creature that appears in a later piece of material? What about this? Are we going to be wandering around in environments with massive sky voids, seemingly disconnected from absolutely everything? Or are you just showing a slither of area, a little bit of animations, and some general idea of what the machinery and environment will look like? We are able to handle work-in-progress material when it is a work in progress. And it is nice to actually see that material because it's interesting to then compare it to the final result, seeing what changes, updates, and differences have been made between when you showed it initially and when you showed it in its finality. Now, would people want something larger scale as well? Sure, especially when the wait is longer. The wait between the last update in 2019 and May 2020 is trailer worthy. The wait between the May 2020 trailer and the October 2020 trailer is trailer worthy. And the wait between October 2020 and right now certainly seemed trailer worthy, but rather than take the time to make one, you decide to take the time to write this post and belittle your Kickstarter backers, insinuating that they're too stupid to understand what a work in progress is. They continue, "We hope to create a great game and our backers will receive that great game. That is the bottom line and our main goal. We will get there sooner with fewer distractions as possible. If people want to stay with us until the end, great. If they don't want to, we still offer a way out." Once again, many of the distractions you have faced are distractions of your own making. If you have to update Microsoft about the state of the game and how well it works on their console, that is because you accepted a deal with Microsoft. Release date plans. For the record, yes, the game has slipped into 2022, and we will have an official confirmation of the delay on the 10th of December. It was supposed to be announced in October, but circumstances out of our control postponed it. If it turns out not to be on the 10th by our or someone else's will, don't hold it too much against us. And for the end, a bit of friendly advice. If lack of communication is so bothersome, just ask for a refund and be done with it. It's just a game. You can play it when it's out if you're still interested. So if you are not as knowledgeable in Scorn, its development history and so on as I am, or in general as good as confronting the kind of crap arguments they've made earlier as I might be, This is probably the part where you might have been pissed off. It certainly was for many Kickstarter backers who ended up demanding refunds. Refunds that Ebb Software seems to be willing to honor, despite not being beholden to their Kickstarter backers in any other way. If you are not as well versed in the history of this game's development as I am, or not as well versed in being able to spot BS arguments as I might be, though I claim no supremacy in that field, everything before this might have slid off the radar and been accepted at face value. But this is the part that really pissed people off, and led to many of them demanding refunds that Ebb Software, despite not being beholden to their Kickstarter backers in any other ways, actually do seem to be honoring. It is odd that they would say that the game has slipped into 2022, but then in the very same sentence say that they will officially announce it on the 10th of December. Not only did you announce it then, but the problem was that Kepler Interactive announced that their studio's games, the earliest one will come out 2022. One of their studios, of course, being Ebb Software. It would have been trivial, super easy, barely an inconvenience, to post a screenshot or some concept art after that announcement and say, yes, unfortunately the game was delayed, but we are hard at work and we will try to update you more often moving forward, especially since the game was supposedly so close to release already. And I can confirm, based on private correspondence between myself and Ebb Software, that number one, the announcement that Kepler made took them by surprise. Despite being one of the co-founding studios, I guess they were left out of the email chain of, hey guys, we're going to officially declare we exist. Is there anything you want to add? Is there any changes you want to make to our official press release? So that's already quite absurd. But additionally, they were actually working on materials to show people within the month of October. And at one point, they even told me that it would be, quote, yep, next week, only for that week to come and go in complete silence and I not hear anything back from them until this update was posted. And believe me, in the email reply where they basically gave a very, very shorthand version of this update, I gave them a written earful. But the fact of the matter, as I've discussed earlier, Ebb Software has been terrible when it comes to managing deadlines that they set for themselves. We were going to make it in October. That's when we were going to release it. And then some BS that isn't expanded upon or discussed at all, just stated something delayed it, some mysterious force. Given the whimsical, wacky world we live in, I'm going to assume it's the Death Eaters, or maybe Sauron, who prevented them from putting out the update, showing the materials that they were evidently preparing. And then December 10th isn't even guaranteed, despite being over a month away when this update was posted. It's still not guaranteed, as if there's something that could come up, short of their entire office burning, or a food fight scenario where the hard drives containing all they worked on are stolen, that would prevent them from being able to put out a simple update. A simple update that wouldn't delay the game any further than it's already been into the nebulous year of 2022. Yet another year-long window that they give themselves for the release of their game. And how easy is it, I might ask, to just say, if you don't like it, then ask for a refund, after you've been bankrolled by a multi-million-dollar investment company and one of the largest corporations on the planet? Would you have had that attitude back in 2017 when you were launching your Kickstarter? Would you have that attitude if, for whatever reason, Microsoft or Kowloon Knights decides to back out of investing in your game and demand their money back? Plenty of well-founded, well-seasoned game studios have also pulled the "don't like it, don't buy it" card to legitimate fan complaints, some to great disaster. You have not even released a game. You have 0 games to your name, and you're walking around with this attitude. And I would like to say that this is where the shitstorm that was this day's update ends, but apparently the person who wrote this did not feel he got across clear enough. A few people, I suppose, were still holding on to some semblance of hope that this was not an unprecedented disaster for Ebb Software. And so, in the comments, he wrote a new, smaller post reiterating his points. I quote, "Greetings once more. Again, there's some misunderstanding of our intentions. This update was primarily about addressing the issues that few are constantly asking us about. It's about informing them and everyone else why we didn't update. Yes, it's somewhat blunt, as some put it, but much more truthful than the PR sugarcoating. Is it possible that you can't have non-traditional PR statements? A more honest approach? We do feel that people that have strong emotional reactions to updates should just forget about the game and move on, as we probably won't be able to accommodate their desires to an extent that they want. We explained our approach, some disagree with it, and that is fine. But that also means the best course of action is parting ways. As someone asked, do we explain things like this to Microsoft, for example? No, but they also don't have reactions like this when we, for example, decline participating at the events. And we did that many times during the past year using the same reason we gave our Kickstarter. At the moment, we want to concentrate on development. If you took this update as anything but honesty, we apologize." Whoever wrote this realized he could still hobble along on a single foot, and decided to shoot the other one to really seal the deal. First of all, it's worth pointing out that there's a difference between not sugarcoating things and sounding like a complete asshole. You can make very basic, truthful statements that don't use the same sort of PR spin you see so much, without alienating your consumer base, especially people who are arguably your core audience, ones who are interested in the art of the game for the art of the game and willing to fund you for that alone. Frodo didn't abandon his friends in need. Why are you abandoning yours? It's also worth pointing out that the update was not honest. There's multiple things that could be considered half-truths and misinterpretations, but there's also some things that are outright lies, if nothing else due to omission. The entire Kepler thing, for example, was mentioned once in mere passing and not expanded upon, even though it is a clear-cut example of them not working on developing the game, taking time, money, manpower, and resources out of working on the game that could have either been spent working on the game or updating their Kickstarter backers. And concerning how you address Microsoft, there is one big question that needs to be asked. Between the October 21st, 2020, and any time these events have come up, or especially now, have you sent them milestone reports, preview builds, concept art, assets, video clips, animations and stuff, screenshots, or a general roadmap as to what you will be working on in the coming months? And if the answer to any of these is yes, then it is not comparable. Microsoft gets updates from you because they, unlike your Kickstarter backers, they have you by the balls. And that's as much Kickstarter's problem as yours, since Kickstarter set things up in a way that people who give you money are not even remotely considered legally investors with all the privileges and entitlements that come with being an investor. But where some project managers realize despite that, it's a good idea to still sort of try to treat them a little bit like investors, give them some of those privileges, try to be a little bit beholden to them, you seem to take the opposite approach. Despite years and years of people asking for you to hire a dedicated PR person, which now was not so much a suggestion as a necessity, or to post more frequent, smaller updates, screenshots, concept arts. We're not picky. I recall in one early video of mine suggesting that you should perhaps get some of the other employees to write a few short paragraphs about their work, similar to the time that you uploaded a couple of songs from the game's soundtrack. Just have some of the different employees write about what they do, the challenges, and stuff like that, and post that on a monthly or 2-month basis. At the end of the day, you weren't sugarcoating anything for your backers, but you were sugarcoating things for yourselves, coming up with excuse after excuse as to why you shouldn't be updating people who have generously donated to you, contradicting yourself in your own update and contradicting your own history, and saying things are better this way, the game will come out faster, despite the fact that the game was already delayed. If I have to choose between over a year of silence and the game to be delayed, or every so often receiving some updates about what's going on and the game being delayed, why would I not choose the latter when the outcome is exactly the same? As said before, this was a rather infuriating post for many, not the least myself, and many people expressed their immense dissatisfaction in the comments, and many have asked for a refund. Now I suspect they don't work on weekends because the replies to these comments asking for refunds ended on Friday and began again on Monday. So it is worth pointing out that on Saturday we received an additional part to Update 10. Project Update 10, Letter from the CEO, posted the 6th of November. Hello everyone. My name is Lubomir Peklar, and I am the CEO of Ebb Software and also the creative director of the game. I take full responsibility for the last update that you received from our Kickstarter yesterday. I quickly and haphazardly read through the draft of the update and in all my wisdom approved it. Reading through again, it was clear that the hostile tone it was written in should not be how we present our ideas or plans to people that help us out. We may be tired, confused, and infuriated or frustrated at our own ineptitude, but there's no reason to lash out at you. For that, I personally apologize. I will do my best for this kind of outburst not to happen again. We will do a proper update regarding all the raised concerns on Monday. Thank you. And so, a day after the previous post, the CEO had to come in and do a bit of damage control, which was for the best considering how many people the previous post upsetted. Now again, I suspect these people don't work on weekends, and I have nothing to say to that about whether it's good or bad. But he did say that a longer a more comprehensive post regarding people's concerns would be posted on Monday. And so, the rest of Saturday went by, and of course there was nothing new. Sunday went by, and as expected, nothing new. But was Ebb Software able to finally adhere to a deadline they set for themselves and make a post on Monday that might satisfy the concerns and complaints that people have had for so long? Let us see. On the 8th of November 2021, Ebb Software posted this. Project Update 10.1 Communication. Hello again. I want to personally address a Kickstarter update that happened on Friday one more time, as well as some of the questions and comments that arose from that post. I would like to start by reiterating that what I said on Saturday. Our update was poorly judged and the tone was not fair for a community that has backed us from the earliest point and supported the project. I sincerely hope you can accept my apology. Now, I'm going to be a bit pedantic and say technically the Kickstarter backers aren't all people who have supported you from the start. A few have actually backed you on your initial 2014 campaign. Some have expressed interest in the game following the 2016 trailer. That's actually when I first learned about the game before I made my YouTube channel. Although I suppose if you really did scrap 90% of what you worked on so far, then yeah, effectively everyone who backed you on Kickstarter was there from the start. But this is all being pedantic and has nothing to do with the quality of the statement at hand for the reasons that actually matter. So moving on. As you will have seen from the news or in Friday's update, Scorn will be moving its release date out into 2022. In truth, the longer development timeline comes down to a few things. Large scope, high production values, and some overly ambitious estimates with our initial timelines. As we start to move towards a final stretch of development, I'd like to share a brief update on where we are as a studio and what steps we'll be taking to be better at keeping our community informed of development progress in the future. So the game has been delayed for unsurprising reasons. I suppose when you do scrap most of what you worked on and start anew, that will indeed delay the release of a game. It is interesting that he says, as we start to move towards a final stretch of development, which I'd imagine we should be close to given the confidence they initially presented in the fall 2021 release date. There's only so much time between when they presented that and when they realized that it's not a realistic release date that there could have been. The post continues, Studio Update. Over the course of this journey, Ebb Software has grown from 20 people back when the Kickstarter went live to 56 people today, all of which are working on realizing our vision for an immersive and emotional experience. While slower than we had hoped, our progress is promising. The game build, the world, and the experience are coming together well. We really can't wait for players to get their hands on it. So just to give an idea of how much faster one could probably expect the game to be developed between 2015 to 2017 for part 1 and 2018 to now, the amount of developers at hand, full-time ones by the looks of it, has almost tripled, and there are freelance developers, temporary ones as well. Communication. I know that we have failed in keeping our Kickstarter community updated over this past year. The truth is, as a project, we needed that time to truly focus on the game, and we are hugely grateful to everyone who has been patiently waiting for the news and updates. However, our Kickstarter community has been with us from the beginning, and I understand and recognize that this is an area we must do better in. As part of our commitment to improving communication, we will be doing the following things. Number 1. Bringing a dedicated community support role into the team. The purpose of this is to help build better two-way communication and share more of the news and updates coming from the studio. That's a good idea and something people have been requesting for quite a while. Just to give a comparison, the Agony devs have delayed Succubus at least once, but wasn't really of any major worry to people because, first of all, like literally everything's been fucking delayed over the last 2 years. But secondly, it's not much of a bother because the developers have been very foregoing in communication. There's usually a guy on Twitter. In fact, they have 2 separate Twitter accounts. One's a roleplay account where someone pretends to be the Succubus character. The devs are sometimes on an official Discord server. They even occasionally reply on the Steam forums. And it is very probable that a lot of this is handled by 1 or 2 people. Being able to have some level of consistent communication with the other side, even if it is a PR person whose entire job is to ensure that things don't go out of control or people get pissed off, is genuinely a very valuable thing, and I think that this whole Scorn debacle has shown that quite well. So that is good to hear that they are going to try to get someone like that. And hopefully when that person comes, he or she makes like a proper announcement, maybe a tweet or whatever on their Twitter profile that people can then respond to and know they can start asking questions or talking. Number 2, a monthly developer deep dive. Monthly news post shared directly with our Kickstarter community. The post will contain content such as development progress updates, sneak peeks of in-game assets, questions and answers, and spotlights on different features or roles within the studio. Again, the sort of things that people have been asking for quite a while. They're finally starting to ramp up communication and start doing some of those things. And this is all like, very easy, quick stuff that could be done in not even an hour, I'd imagine. The first update will go live in December. No indication of when in December, or even if December 10 is still a thing, but the window is December, and I suppose there's nothing to do but wait and see what comes of it. In addition to communication with our core community, we will also soon be in a position to share more trailers, news, and content with the world as we move towards our release date. Given earlier that he has stated they're in the final stretch of production or nearing that point, and given the confidence they expressed in the fall season, basically a 3-month window back in July and August, it's not surprising that we would start to see more consistent communication and more substantial material, and hopefully that is the case. I'd like to take a moment to thank you all again for your ongoing support. You believed in the vision for Scorn at the very beginning, and though our Kickstarter community and our partners, we've been able to keep the same vision for the game while drastically expanding the quality and ambition we can deliver. We know that words and promises can only take us so far, and it is our aim that by sharing better communication and more visibility into development progress, we can build trust and excitement ahead of the release next year. Thank you all. Lubomir Peklar, Ebb Software. And that concludes his trilogy of updates. Now, my initial sort of snarky response is, can you hurry up and post a new trailer, because I've been using the same clip over and over and over and over again for this video. But more realistically, what I actually have to say is, I do hope that they are willing to really try to stick by their promises with this update. It is what the community has been asking for a long time, more consistent communications and some more transparency with what's going on behind the scenes. Now, while I don't think that these 3 updates is a redemption arc, I do think it is the beginning of one. And if, come December, there is indeed a deep dive into what's going on behind the scenes, whether it's meant only for Kickstarter backers or the general public is allowed to view it, I do not know. That will be some very great news, and I do genuinely hope that this is the end of the dark age of waiting for Scorn and the beginning of something better. One misinterpretation many people have with people's dissatisfaction with waiting is the idea that they demand the game to come out now, as soon as possible. Rush it if you have to. But the fact of the matter is that people are fine with waiting if they feel that their wait is worth it. And a good way to make people feel that their wait is worth it is to send some updates and present some proof that yes, things are being worked at. Time has not somehow frozen down in Serbia. The game will eventually come out. You just need a little bit more patience. So I suppose that is all there really is to say about this. As I said before, there's no screenshots or trailers or anything else to pick apart and lore theorize about, but something like this last message where they said, yes, we're going to do better, we're going to actually start communicating, we're actually going to try to adhere to a consistent schedule, is worth as much as a trailer in my opinion. After all, we've gotten 2 last year, and then an entire year of silence because they have not screwed up so much that it comes to the point where they realize that they're running on thin ice in terms of community will and benevolence. So, maybe in December we'll make a new video again exploring more of this game. But until then, I hope you enjoyed the video, that I gave you something to think about and otherwise entertained you. Take care.